Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 56, February 8th, 2019. Shamanism for Everyday Living, Calling in Ceremony and Ritual for Wellness. What is shamanism? How can you get support from the elements of earth and nature? How can an energetic and shamanic understanding guide your conception and pregnancy? How is Spirit Baby honored by this practice? I have a special guest. Her name is Nikki Mahea. She is a channel, a healer, a ceremonialist who has dedicated her life to spiritual practice. As a Reiki Master Teacher, Shamanic Practitioner, and RYT 500, she offers sessions, trainings, workshops, gatherings, and circles in the Los Angeles area. She's the founder of Little Journeys, an empowerment program with a focus on nature connection, nonviolent communication, and creative expression for children and their guardians. Nikki serves as a space holder and guide through the soulful journey into what she calls heart space, that often unattended place within us that is the core of who we are. She is a compassionate teacher who is deeply fulfilled by helping others open to a more meaningful and connected human experience. Hello, Nikki. Welcome.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I always like to kind of check in with, I remember meeting Nikki. I don't even remember the moments, but I met her at our amazing Waldorf Influence School, and her girls are, I believe they're a little bit younger, not by far. And I knew when I connected with Nikki, I was like, I need to know this woman, this mother, this healer, this entrepreneur. And we just gathered for 2019 at this beautiful women's circle, and Nikki was able to hold the space with us all, and it was so amazing and so healing. And we did speak about shamanism, and I'm very curious because I have I'm not going to lie, I have a little prejudgment about it. I'm sure you must hear that a lot. I just feel like when I've seen shamanic people, they're off the wall. They're in bonkers land. And I'm like, is that really what shamanism is? And I want us to the way you kind of connected with it, I felt like it felt so beautiful and earth-centered, but I don't know if many people are connecting in that way. But I want to hear more and how is shaman? How do you define that, and how do you bring that to others?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that lovely intro, by the way. And I just, it is interesting what you said about when you see people, we have a certain perception, people that present in a certain way. And I know what you're talking about. And for me, I think, and I completely relate, for me, what it looks like is, right now, healing and wellness and all this is it's on trend. I hate to even say that, but it is. Mm-hmm. Which is good, right? But you've also got, then it becomes like a market, and then we're talking about consumerism, and all that stuff comes into it. So I get what you're saying, and I think with anything, there's that kind of yucky, kind of you can just feel when somebody's coming from a place that's more grounded and heartful. So I think I understand what you're picking up on in that world. And to be honest, it might be a little out there for people, and for because in our culture, as far as North American dominant culture, we don't have our own kind of practice as our culture is right now. We don't really have a shamanic lineage, right? But if we go for a more ancestral approach, right? So we each have a lineage, a bloodline that connects us far back enough. It will connect us to some form of shamanism, or perhaps a better word to use would be animism. So most of us, for me, my Celtic roots, there's an animist kind of earth connection. And by animism, I mean the belief that everything in the natural world is alive and has a spirit, trees, rocks, animals, and that kind of thing. So shamanism, I could just go on forever, but I think the type of shamanism that I practice is what I would call core shamanism. So I don't practice a specific lineage that does not belong to me, you know what I mean? So with core shamanism, the teachings as I understand them are, the shamanic practices really invite us into the heart space and teach us how to really see through the eyes of the heart, as opposed to using like our intellect all the time too much. Like we really want to drop into a more intuitive place. And another piece that's so huge for me about shamanism is it's a path of direct revelation. So what this means is that through journey work, and there's many different kinds of ways to take a shamanic journey, but I think the most simple and accessible way would be with a drum. So we have a monotonous drum beat, whether we're drumming ourselves into the journey or someone's, drumming for us. We can go into this kind of a state that allows us to sort of really transport into what we would call a non-ordinary reality. And in this place, we connect with our guides, with our spirit allies and our guardians, and we can find guidance and wisdom for our lives in that place, and there's no intermediary needed. So you don't need, say, a priest. You don't need a shaman even. You are the shaman. I wouldn't walk around calling yourself a shaman. I don't call myself a shaman. I'm not a shaman. That would be very, appropriative of certain cultures, I believe, but you can think of yourself as, you don't need an intermediary. The connection between you and your guides is direct in that way when we go into that space. So we can bring back that guidance, bring back that and even healing can occur in that space. And we bring it back into the physical, this ordinary reality, to the physical realm. And we want to integrate that information and bring it forward into our lives. Really, as my teacher would say, make a good home for it. We don't it's not just about getting information. We want to really implement that into our lives so that we can grow forward in a way that's healthy and healing. And so, healing is an aspect of shamanism for me as well. And it's very much like an earth-connected practice. So it's not just a practice. It's a way of life. It really is a way of life. So, and like I said, it's ancestral. And I love that you mentioned the elements, because the elements are a huge part. Air, fire, water, earth, space. This is all the ether. It's very much connected in the work as well. So, and of course, as you also mentioned, ritual and ceremony, which is kind of missing, right, in our culture. If you could call our culture even a culture, it's not that sort of reverence that we're really honoring the sacred, respecting the sacred is kind of missing. And so shamanic work and these practices can really bring that back into our lives. And it's much needed, I believe, at this day and age especially. So, yeah.
As you were speaking about, and questions, thoughts, things running through into my mind, and you made me remember, and recently going to the Day of the Dead festival and, hanging out with your husband and your kids. These dancers in this, I don't know, that the shaking they have, what are those musical nut things on their bodies and chimes and the drum beat. And this has happened to me before, which, I always feel like I go into this hypnotic place, but it actually makes me want to cry and break down. And I have never really shared or talked about this with anybody, but I remember zooming back probably 15 or more years ago. I was in Santa Monica, and they had these Mayan dancers. And all of a sudden, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I felt like I was actually being traumatized. And then I felt like it felt familiar. For me, it felt like I didn't know how to handle the beating of the sounds and the music. And I feel like then I was like, I feel like I've had a past life in this kind of era. And then, zooming, fast forwarding and doing so much spiritual work later and feeling more comfortable. I go to this Day of the Dead festival, and then I feel the reawakening of it. And then I go, wow, what is this? I feel like I wish I could just sit there and really let go, but I felt like I couldn't, right?
You're in public.
I'm in public. I don't know. People would be like, call 911. What's wrong with her? But, I'm so curious because you talk about the drumming. And I used to, maybe trauma is not the right word. For me, it was just like a lot of fear. But it was also, I'm very curious. I'm very curious to go, to sit and then see, where is my body going? What is this inner journey? What is your thoughts about that?
My first curiosity is, I wonder, have you ever done any kind of, 23andMe or any of those kind of, where you literally can do the home kit?
No, I haven't.
Because I wonder, you never know. I was surprised to find I have a very trace amount of Native American lineage. It's so trace that I don't mention it because it's very trace, and I almost feel like I almost feel like I can't even claim it. It's such a small amount. So that's something I'm actually working through on my own personal level because, Celtic is the majority, 88% of my. But I'm curious about that. If you had that visceral reaction, you never know. You could have some trace amounts or more than trace amounts, and I love that you mentioned the past life possibility because, and that's actually might be an interesting thing to talk about too because I did do before I got into shamanism, when I was trying to get pregnant, when we were trying to get pregnant with our oldest, we were having a hard time. It took about 10 months and I ended up doing a past life regression therapy session with somebody. This is before I had these tools of journeying and all this. And I got pregnant within a month of that. It was like I traveled. I literally traveled. It's similar. It is very shamanic in nature because you are traveling to non-ordinary reality. It's just a different method that used. It was almost more like light hypnosis kind of thing, although I was fully aware and present. But I was shown an image. Actually, it was a whole thing, and it would take me 20 minutes to tell you the whole story, so I won't do that. But the takeaway from it was that I was like a kind of a lowly circus performer, and sort of a well-to-do man who was married had impregnated me, and I was in love with him, and he murdered me, and obviously, so me and the child inside of me both died in the past life regression, right, therapy session. And so here I was trying for 10 months. It was just a horrendous experience with people that are, when you want to be pregnant now, you're ready to be pregnant now. It's that was really hard. And it was literally the next, cycle that I was pregnant. And I feel that there was something healed in that space where I was able to really, this is something that I had a block there. There was something that was past life related, keeping me from getting pregnant. And so that's the kind of magic and healing. So it might be something interesting for you to explore with the Mayan. If it was both of those,
I'm so curious.
Public ceremonies were Mayan ceremonies. Yeah, you could explore that in a journey. That would be something really interesting to explore for you, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to see. Yeah.
I mean, it's
that's
our
the thing.
soul remembers, whether if it's an ancestral thing for you with your bloodline in this time, then even though you would have no remembrance in your brain about that lineage, there's something in your bones. There would be something in your bones and your blood that remembers, and if there was trauma, that's passed down. Whether we experienced it or it was our great 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 grandparents, that trauma is passed down. But if it's not that, then it could be, like you said, a past life connection. And in that sense, the soul remembers. So you'll have the trauma at that level as opposed to the physical. So, very interesting.
So, I'm really curious. I don't know, it sounds like you said your conception journey was, kind of, you felt that kind of stress and that push. And I know a lot of women and couples that tune in, they're at different levels of their conception journey. And it sounds like that. I love how you said shamanism is the way of life. There's no separation. It's not this, it's like the spirit in all things. And I feel like a lot of people can really resonate with that. Everything has a certain vibration or a certain energy. And can you drum in pregnancy and conception? I feel like there's a little difference. Like if you're in conception, the drumming, have you seen that? I've never really explored using sounds with that, but what is your experience with that, or what do you imagine, or what have you connected with?
Well, for conception, like I said, back when I was conceiving, I didn't have these practices. I did have my Reiki practice, so I would give myself Reiki. Reiki is just a very safe, very simple, anyone can do it, hands-on healing method that I did use that a lot during conception. As far as the sound and the drumming, I feel like with conception, I love that the communication with the spirit baby, right? You talk about that a lot. And I feel like that would be, there's something about song, singing, like in shamanism, we would call it a medicine song, whether it be you calling your baby in. You don't have to be a singer to do it. I'm not a singer by any stretch of the imagination. When I hold my ceremonies here, I always find myself singing, and it's okay that I'm not, nobody would pay to see me at a concert, because the song that I am offering it's a medicine song. It comes from my heart, and it doesn't even have to have English words. It could be gibberish. It's about the energy behind the song. So I think if I were trying to conceive now, I would really tune in with sound in that way, my own voice, like calling in, like spirit baby into the body, like this is the home, right? And so, and sound moves matter, it moves matter. And so at that vibration, I don't know, there's something about that's just coming through right now as far as conception goes about song. And I think drumming could be, I don't think it would be harmful at all. And certainly the shamanic journey could be helpful to connect with spirit baby, because it's just another method of connecting, and having a conversation if that's what that soul wants to do in that journey. And if not, then you can call on a guide, who will help you, perhaps an animal guide or an ancestral guide to help you to connect with baby and, the soul that's wanting to come in. And as far as pregnancy, though, I think that for pregnancy, like once that baby's in there, I feel like drumming, any kind of sound, perhaps not like the, those big crystal, you have one, the crystal bowl, those can be a little bit dark. I don't know how that would be I'm not sure, but I know that for some people those can be a little bit overwhelming, a little jarring. So, but I think that it's like
the gong. The gong is like that too,
gong.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So things that are a little, like chimes and drum, and just the sound of your own voice. I mean, that is your best instrument as far as I'm concerned, especially with connecting. My kids love my voice. I mean, it's like my little one thinks that she tells me, Mommy, why do you have such a beautiful singing voice? And I don't, But to her, it's that, because I've been singing.
It's mama's love voice. It's what I've heard in the womb. It's my everything.
Yeah, I've been singing with her for such a long time. And there's also, I was thinking about, because I have kind of a special interest, I guess, in death, as you know, and loss. And I did have a loss before I got pregnant with my oldest. It was an early, first trimester loss. And as you know, my mom died very tragically last year. And so I really have I've learned how grief is really a tool for healing, and not something to really run away from or try to just get to the end of it. It's really like a magical journey, that whole grief process. And so I was kind of thinking about shamanic practices for somebody who might have experienced a loss. And again, I wish I would have had these tools when I experienced my miscarriage. But I think that there's something about creating an altar, specifically an ancestor altar, and that's something that, I really recommend that everyone have something like that. There's a variety of different reasons why we would want to have an ancestor altar. It's for honoring, of course, and for remembering. But there's also something about having that physical, like if you do have any kind of unhealthy ancestors who may not be completely, elevated to kind of like the higher seat, so to speak, sometimes, they can attach and things can happen with our own bodies. And so having this ancestor altar gives a physical space for some of that energy to go to, and you feed the altar, you feed it with, you can have a candle flame going, you can have some sage burning, feed it with fresh flowers is the most beautiful, like keeping fresh flowers there, keeping it cleaned up, don't let dust collect, really tending your altar space. I love that so much, and I love the idea of, whether if you had an early loss in your pregnancy or later, I mean, we can always honor that child, that baby, or what, I don't know what you would call an early lost baby, if you would still call it a baby, I would, is an ancestor, right? So it earns, he or she would earn that rightful place on that ancestor altar. So I think that, and it's also something really, really beautiful to do with your living children. In fact, I'm going to post a picture on my social media of Ezra, my oldest daughter, making an ancestor altar. It was so beautiful, and so that's a really good shamanic practice to bring in, to just as a family,
So
I love that.
I want to pause you for a minute, because there's some interesting things that you were sharing, and I want to go back, because this altar, this lineage altar, but also this present altar to bring you into that space of, it sounds like positivity and, also birth loss. I know you mentioned birth loss, and I do want to talk about that. That was one of my questions, because I've heard throughout the years with different shamanic practitioners that they, especially around abortion and miscarriage, especially around abortion, I would say, where there's a calling back of the spirit. And I don't know a lot of details about that. I don't know if you do. How does that intertwine with that? If somebody's had an abortion, whether it be a choice or medical issues, as well as miscarriage, which are a little bit different. And so I know from a lot of my perspective that, the soul is a soul, and so the spirit is there even if the baby is, a yolk, there's still an energy force connected to that. And so it sounds like you're saying, I really loved what you said about the altar. Like, let's say there are women I've supported that has multiple miscarriages, to hold some type of, I don't want to say relic is the word, but just some type of energy that it's okay to be with that feeling. And I think this is where it's like, in our culture around miscarriage especially, it's like, no, you're not supposed to be with that feeling. Let's just, grieve a tiny bit, but just let's move on. And so I love that, like, energy that you're talking about, the altar. And I almost imagine each pregnancy, maybe that's gone through loss, like some type of symbol, whether it's a rock, a flower, or something baby-like, to just, bring it into this space. Not to remind us of heartache, but just to remind us of that your womb space did create conception and energy around holding this being. And now there's a separation of that. What can you speak about? I don't know if that's been your experience, or what about that whole calling back the soul, or, detaching the soul. I feel like those are the words I hear a lot with this shamanic, so then you can make space really for this next conception or...
Yeah, I mean, as far as loss goes, I think maybe what you're talking about as far as calling the soul, are you talking about soul retrieval?
Oh, maybe that's it. Yeah. Can you talk about that, what that means?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't thought much about it with like loss kind of thing. I think about it more working with a living person. So for many of us, my understanding is that when I think of soul retrieval, and by the way, there's a book by Sandra Ingerman called Soul Retrieval. And if you're interested in the topic, I just want to put that out there, because it's really good. But so with, like, as we, live our lives, and as we get older, and for a lot of us, really everyone, I think, I don't know that anyone gets out of childhood without some kind of trauma. It might not be trauma as we would think of it as an adult, but even like being teased at school could be traumatic or something like that. And then we get older and we've got all these different layers of conditioning that just like layer on top, one on top of the other on top of the other. And before we know it, we don't even know who we are, or we had to perhaps as children have certain survival mechanisms in place that perhaps as an adult would not look healthy. But as a child, as we were in the care of adults who may have not been safe people, oh, sorry, that beep might have been my phone. I need to mute it here. We may have to develop certain survival mechanisms that keep us safe and keep us alive during that time, you know? So, for example, like if somebody has a kind of like abusive father, I'm actually using someone that I know very well as an example, and was abusive to everyone in the family but him, because he just was like the one that would show up and be the pleaser and make everything okay. And so even though as an adult that's not appropriate, right, to like someone that's doing harm, we don't want to make it okay for them. But as a child, he had to do that to keep himself safe. So he had to sort of divorce himself from certain parts of him that are parts of him that make him who he is, that he had to literally kind of disown in order to survive as a kid. So then growing up into adulthood, that's where we get into these like, where we're like, why do I do this? Why do I keep running up against the same wall? And so in that space, or from that place, we want to call that part of the soul back that we had to disown for whatever reason, you know, call it back so that we can fully integrate it back into, you know, so that we're whole and we're healed and we're healthy. So that's my understanding of soul retrieval. And I'm not sure. There's probably something I don't know about loss and the soul of a baby with abortion. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to explore for sure. And I think through the shamanic journey, you can definitely go into that, again, that non-ordinary reality with the intention, because when you go into a journey, you want to have some kind of an inquiry going in. You don't have to, but it could just be a little chaotic when you get in there, and you might not know how to make sense of what comes through. So when you go with a specific inquiry, such as connecting with the soul of a baby who was aborted, then you can, that's a specific way of going in, and you'll get guidance and wisdom specifically around that, if not the soul of the baby specifically coming through as well, possibility. So, yeah.
You're inspiring me so much right now, because I'm imagining you like beating your drum, and we're sitting in this circle with women that are wanting to connect with their babies in spirit through sound. I wonder if that could be done online or in person, as well as even through birth loss. You know, using I feel like,
there's so many things that can be done as far as, I think there's something about coming together as a community. One-on-one work is great. I have a teacher that I work with one-on-one, but there's something about when you're grieving and when you gather with other people who are grieving, especially when it's a loss very similar to yours. And I feel like when we bring in that ritual aspect, it's so sacred. I'm actually getting chills just talking about it, because we can, there's I'm going to say another book. Is that okay? There's a book
definitely. No, people, we share books all the time in the podcast.
Yeah. There's a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller, and it's about, it's pretty much about gathering with a community of people and having these grief rituals. And he's got suggestions in there of how you can create your own grief circle, you know. And there's certain, like when I say rituals, like some kind, like I think he had an example in there that was really beautiful, where everybody would have like a smooth stone, and they would breathe, you know, like blow their grief into it, not to get rid of it, but just to really imbue the stone with that energy and just really kind of giving it away, you know, like allowing the stone to sort of be the carrier, and speaking your love and whatever into the stone. And then as a group, each person would go up to this bowl of water, and there would be some prayer and some kind of intention, and they would put the stone into the water, And it was just an act of everybody showing, like, look, all of our grief is here in this. The water is holding all of our grief. Water tends to represent mother in shamanism. I find it's kind of, like you talked about the mother wounds before. I think about water. You know, water really holds that. And then they all went outside and they fed a tree with the water. It's symbolic. It's just symbolic of something that on a group level, you're kind of, it's connection, it's sharing, and it's doing something in the physical. You're creating a ritual, and it could be anything. You know, you could bury your stones in the earth, or, you know, you could have a fire ceremony. You know, there's so many different ways to bring ritual into group work like that. But with grief, I think it's really beautiful, and just really allowing people to, if they need to break down, it's a safe space to do that, and everyone understands. Or at least everyone allows you to do that. There's no fixing. There's no, oh, let me make this stop. At least, you know, the hope is that doesn't happen. You know, we're really allowing each other to we hold space for those who are needing to have a release. You know, we hold space without fixing. And also we allow others to hold space for us, and we step in to be witnessed ourselves in our own grief. I think it's actually beautiful, the grieving process. Maybe not everyone would agree, but my mom died last year, and so it's pretty fresh. It hasn't quite been a full year. We're coming up in a couple weeks on a year, and I have found the grieving to really be present for it, and to treat it like a guest in my home. Like, if this is here, this is right now.
A guest in your home. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's been a beautiful process. And as you know, it's brought me to like a heightened interest around death and dying. And people, as you know, I'm preparing to do a training, a death midwifery training. For what reason, I'm still not entirely sure, whether it's, you know, to enhance the work that I already do, or perhaps I'll be working as a death doula, or maybe it's just, you know, life skills. I don't know. But I feel that there's something about loss and death and grief. These are kind of cultural phobias, at least here in dominant North American culture. And I know you've got people listening from all over, but maybe other people could relate to that too. That it's kind of
I would say I call it developed cultures, because there are a lot of people that do join from all around the world, and more in developed cultures, there is that phobia and fear. It seems to be very common, is what I'm hearing, you know, around Europe and even in Asia and Australia and in between. There is that, you know, there is that connection of phobia of, and,
of the cycle, that natural cycle. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like ready to die right now. I don't think but that the thing is that the fear is actually, I think, natural. I don't know that I'll ever not be afraid of, you know, but the idea is that I bring that fear in as an ally for me to, like, okay, I'm going to sit with this. And that's also a very shamanic practice, you know, whether we're having anxiety or anger or fear or just really, really deep sorrow, to be able to really sit with that, you know, because we tend to sort of push it away. And when we push it away, it doesn't mean that it's really going anywhere. We're just making it so we can't see it, you know. So the idea is that we really get up close and personal with that. And that's what I mean by bringing it in as an ally, you know. What is the flip side of fear? The flip side of fear is that, you know, or anxiety, say, for example, is that you're a sensitive, intuitive being, you know, and you can drop into that place of feeling fearful. And really, when we get really present with it, and there's certain, again, shamanic practices of, you know, really focusing in what part of the body is the fear in, and then maybe placing, let's say it's the heart, maybe placing a couple fingers to the heart, just a couple, like very gently, and maybe you tune in and maybe you ask, you know, is there a younger part of me that is triggered around this topic? Is there a younger part of me that's afraid, that needs me to be present for it, you know? And oftentimes I find that our own inner children, it's like a cliche, but it's so true, that a lot of the time we're triggered by something else in our lives. We're just not aware of it. And so it could be that it's really your inner, you know, 14-year-old that's terrified. And it's become somatic for you because you're not listening on that emotional level because you're pushing it away. I don't like fear. And then it'll just, that inner 14-year-old will be like, okay, you're not listening on an emotional level. Let me put this in your solar plexus, and it's just going to sit there like a brick until you pay attention and until you give me the space and until you acknowledge me, you know? So, I don't know if that's helpful. That might be too much information, but there's so much.
No, that's great. No, it's good. I know, because there's probably so much, because we're talking about life, we're talking about death, and,
I know. It's a lot.
Well, that shamanic understanding, if it's all things, I mean, and the spirit of energy and the spirit of spirit, you know, it's woven in between both. And so I know many women and couples have, you know, I always call their conception a journey, which is so interesting because I think a journey is a word you hear a lot with shamanism, the journey. But life is a journey. I feel like, you know, some women on a conception journey, pregnancy journey, and I've even called like a birth loss healing journey. And there's so many different pieces to that. But I'd love for you to share, just kind of shifting back into ceremony and ritual. You said some really poignant, amazing, beautiful, you know, things that I feel like we're kind of probably all just digesting. Just for the beginner, like, what does an altar look like? Maybe even your own altar, or let's say somebody's like is on a conception journey and they're like, I don't know what this altar thing is. Like, what does that? How do I do that?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because a couple times as we've been talking and when you've asked questions or so I want to just, one of the things that I love so much about what I would call shamanism, again, I don't practice a specific tradition. If you're talking about a specific tradition, like, for example, the Huichol people of Mexico might have a very specific way of doing something, right? But with core shamanism, it's coming really from because unless you have a connect with your bloodline, and most of us kind of don't because it kind of gets lost a couple generations back, it's kind of like we have to not make it up as we go, but we have to really tune in to our own, just our own needs and to what is authentic and true and genuine and aligned and accurate for us, you know? So that's why I say it is an ancient healing technology and a way of life that teaches us to see through the eyes of the heart, because it's not black and white. So I love that you asked, like, what should the altar look like? And the answer would be that there's not one way. I can share with you what my altar would look like. And yours might be completely different, because you might have a certain, let's say, for example, I usually have at least 2 altars in my house at any given time. I have my ancestor altar that doesn't ever come down. But that said, I do tend to it. You have to feed it and tend to it. You don't want it to just collect up spider webs, and you know what I'm saying? Because that's we want to continue, you know, whether it be daily or even just like once a week, where you're, you know, depending on how busy you are, where you're dusting it off. You're offering maybe some fresh flowers. Maybe you've got a new crystal and it wants to be up on that ancestor altar. Or maybe you found your grandmother's handkerchief and that wants to be up there, you know, some kind of meaningful object or something, you know, perhaps let's say your mother loved eating caramels or something. Maybe there's some caramels sitting up there. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be any one specific way. And then the other altar, and photographs. If I didn't say that, I hope that was, kind of maybe obvious. That I put photographs of the pictures of, you know, my family members who have died, even some that I've never met, you know, like my great-grandfather and my aunt who died before I was born. Like, I put there, if I can have access to a picture of them, I'll put a picture up there. And, you know, if you have trauma around a family member, I just want to say, like, for example, somebody that I know who's very steeped in this work, she was, she had a lot of trauma and there was a lot of abuse with her father. But she found herself not having him up there, and maybe not having him up there is what's needed for you in your healing. I'm not telling anyone that they should, if it doesn't feel right. But my friend from this place, she really was like, no, I need to have him up there, because otherwise, if he's not on that physical, it's going to come from my body. And she felt that it was safer to have him kind of on the altar. But sometimes she would just turn his picture around. Like some days when she was feeling, she just couldn't look at his face. So it's like he was there, but she couldn't see him. So there's all different kinds of ways, and there's no one way, and I don't feel there's any right way, with the exception of we want to tend to the altar itself. And then I also have an altar that is my personal altar that is ever changing, and I keep it in the place in my house where I sit, which is in front of the fireplace, because in my work, fire is very central, and so I'm constantly in relationship with fire. And again, that as an animist, everything's alive and has a spirit, and I work very closely with fire. So I have my personal altar right there on my hearth and kind of to the side, and it's always changing. It depends on what I'm working with, and actually there usually will be some crystals. Sometimes there's medicine cards from certain decks that I like, perhaps a certain animal. I'll have a card there if I'm working with, say, for example, horse has been coming up for me a lot lately. So I've got one of my little medicine cards with horse on it. And right now I'm actually, because I'm in apprenticeship with my mentor in this work. I mean, I've been in apprenticeship with her for quite some time, and it seems to be never ending, but I'm sort of stepping into this new, it's just a deepening of the work. And so I really heard that I need to paint, and I don't consider myself a painter or an artist, but there's an art piece that wants to come through me right now to be on my altar that's representative of this new work that I'm stepping into. And so right now I'm creating something to put on my altar that's just like on a little piece of paper-sized canvas. So anyway, that's a long way to say that you could put anything there that has meaning. I mean, as long as it's meaningful. I've even put my children's, I've had toys on my altar before when I'm trying to look and match with my little one, and she's got a little unicorn little toy. I'll put that on there because it's just a reminder of what I'm working or what's working me at any given time, if that makes sense.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. No, it does. It's I feel like it's really helpful, and everybody has different ways of creating altars for life, for death, for conception. I think it's really beautiful, intentional spaces. Yeah, to see how it's, continuously changing and moving, and it's like the altar becomes intuitive somehow. But I like what you said about, clearing the webs and the dust. That's, that makes sense, instead of it's like that you're keeping it fresh and active. And I know in my healing space, I almost feel like it's more of a pregnancy altar. I'm not trying to get pregnant, but there's so many women that come through my space. And so there's this image, I have statues, crystals, wood, and I do change it from time to time. It feels like something about it feels like it gets stale or old, or I don't know what it is. And then I just kind of like see how it wants to kind of shift around. And I know in my bedroom I'm working on kind of a death altar, but it brings up a lot of feeling. And, like you're saying, like the pictures, and I'm like, do I want this, and to what extent, and, who gets to be on that altar, because my space is so limited. And I think it's just forming itself. And, I'd like to, I'll share that with you sometime. And I haven't really ever even talked about that with anybody. I don't even think Rinny knows, my husband. I just started, like, one day these pieces started coming together, and I'm like, oh, look, that's my brother. And then I step away and go, okay, well, let's see how it kind of grows or, and develops over time without pressure to have to do it. Like you were saying, like, I don't want to be like, oh, you have to do this. It just seems like it naturally formed that way. But I love everything that you're sharing is so, again, is so wonderful and so helpful. And I want to, as we're coming to the end here, I'd love for you to share any final words, as well as your contact information, your website, and any services or products that you're offering that you would like to share as well.
Yeah, I feel compelled to share one more thing on that point that you just said. I hope it's okay with the ancestor. I'm sorry, but I want to make a point about when we have an altar where we're honoring our ancestors. It's important, I feel, to remember that we don't necessarily, perhaps not all of our ancestors are healthy and well, and some of them, many of them are, and we hope that they get to that place where they are healthy and well. But when we have an ancestor altar, we're offering our gratitude and our prayers. Thank you for giving me life, even if it's, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're like calling them into our space, like when I open sacred space and I'm calling in the different directions, and I'm calling in the guides and the beings that I want to have present in my medicine space or in my like you said, your sacred space. I'm not necessarily inviting all of my ancestors to join the party because they might not all be well. And so I always will specify that if you're inviting your ancestors in, I always specify that I'm inviting my ancestors who are in 100% healed space to join me in my, and to the others, sending my prayers, my gratitude, my thanksgiving. Thank you for giving me life. And, so just want to make that distinction that I feel that we do have to be kind of, it's good to be careful. We want to keep our sovereignty, intact and only invite those in who are going to be working on behalf of our highest and best good. So that's just a little, I felt that was important to add there, just in case anybody makes an ancestor altar and decides to call them all in or something like that. So,
yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. So you asked me to close, and gosh, I guess what I would say is that that this type of work is really, I feel that it's in the bones of every living person, and it doesn't have to look any specific way. I think it's really about being present to our lives and being present to really. Again, coming from a heart place as opposed to a head place, and noticing when we're triggered and when we are triggered, and to perhaps acting out or whatever it is, to have some kind of inquiry, like, oh, that's interesting, or a curiosity, like, that's interesting that I did that in that way. I wonder what that's all about. And for some people, this work might not appeal, and perhaps they do something more like, therapy with somebody, like a very heartful therapist, or so there's not just one way, but it's really about respect for the sacred. And I think that's what people need so desperately in this day and age, is a respect for the sacred, because we've kind of lost touch with that. So I think that would kind of be my closing thought, I guess. And as far as things that I have going, most of what I offer is local. I do have to Los Angeles, where I live. I offer trainings and different things, but I also do one-on-one work. I offer distant shamanic Reiki healing sessions, and I also offer oracle card readings, which are pretty much like, I do work with the decks, but I also direct voice channel the information from my guides. And I hope to I have a new offering coming up in the spring, which is a medicine wheel workshop that I'm going to be doing in Los Angeles first, but the idea is that I will turn that into an online offering so people can really learn about the medicine wheel, which is kind of a map, it kind of maps all the different things we've been talking about, and it's a really easy way to sort of track yourself in this work, and it just gives you kind of like a container and a framework. If you've been hearing me talking and you're like, what's she talking about? The medicine wheel kind of puts it all into a place that's contained, and you can kind of see, okay, I'm working with this right now. I'm working with my visioning work and my manifestation, and I'm getting clarity around things, or I'm doing shadow work, and I'm kind of doing the deep dive into that kind of realm. So it's just, the medicine wheel is a beautiful tool. So hopefully that'll be something that will be available online in the springtime, in the Northern Hemisphere springtime. Yeah.
Great. Did you share your website? Let's share it again and make sure people know how to find you.
So it's NikkiMejia.com. So that's NICKI M like Mary, EJIA.com. And my contact information is on there, so there's a
Wonderful.
little contact.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again, Nikki, for being here at Spirit Baby Radio.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Of course.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.